Hi, everyone. Very timely on this September 7th. Before we start, our county was approved as a disaster area, so please start placing those calls to FEMA. And I have the honor of having Todd Bauman, president of Bauman Group, right here in Bridgewater, to help us along because I found out a lot of shocking news. Todd is my insurance broker, and he is here to give us the latest. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Marie.
I really welcome you. So here's what I was surprised to hear. My homeowners, even though I do not live in a flood zone, would not cover all of the events from Ida.
Sure. No homeowners policies cover flood damage. You'd have to purchase a flood insurance policy, which is eligible for any home anywhere to get flood insurance.
So that's the first thing I think I'm going to buy. How are the costs for an area that is not in a flood zone?
So there's two types of flood zones. There's a standard flood zone, which is people typically have to buy because they have a mortgage and it's required. And then you have a thing called the preferred risk flood zone. Preferred risk flood zone is called Zone X, which anybody can purchase at a much more reduced premium. And it provides the same amount of coverage you would have for a standard flood policy based on the levels of coverage you choose, but at a much lower rate.
And Todd, from what you had mentioned, even with this policy, what's covered is like the HVAC and rugs, but not your belongings in those beautiful finished basements?
So there's a really good summary of flood insurance coverage at the FEMA flood site. If you look at called Flood Smart, there is a way to go there and find out what type of coverage it does provide. But basically, since most people are experiencing floods who don't have, aren't in a flood zone, are experiencing floods in their basement, there's specific types of coverage that is covered, and there's things that are not covered. So you'd have to actually talk to an insurance agent, someone who's able to sell flood insurance, and then they can just go into more detail with you about that.
But the bottom line is, with the way the weather has changed in the world, in the country, and especially in New Jersey, the
Sure.
smart thing to do is just because you don't live in a flood zone, think you're covered.
Yes. I mean, we've seen, many of the claims that we're seeing from this storm are people who had their heating system, their air conditioning system, their, water heater. Those are the things their biggest concern. Those are big ticket items. Those are being destroyed because of the water in their basement. And those things would all be covered under a preferred risk flood policy or a standard flood policy.
And not on homeowners.
Not on homeowners, but there is something available for homeowners, which we can go into.
Okay. And is that with the sump pumps?
So depending on your type of policy and what carrier, some carriers provide, the carrier I represent gives everybody a minimum of $5,000 of sump pump backup coverage, water backing up through your sump pump, whether the sump pump failed, couldn't handle the water, or electricity went out, whatever it may be. You can get a basic amount of $5,000 of sump pump backup coverage, but the water must come up through the sump pump. If you don't have a sump pump, that is the definition of what a flood insurance is. You need to have a flood insurance policy.
So in our case, where we have a sump pump, we're not in a flood zone. We should get flood insurance and sump pump, which I will be calling you about this week.
Potentially. I always say talk to your agent or your broker, and they can talk to you better about what type of coverage based on what fits your risk.
And things like sound systems and all, how would you get all of that covered in a basement, a media room?
So that's one of the things that are typically not covered under a federal flood insurance policy. So clothing, furniture, those are considered contents. Those are not covered under a standard flood insurance policy or a preferred risk flood policy. What you can do is get coverage under your sump pump backup policy to provide coverage for those contents, to provide, to make sure those things are covered. So some people actually buy a flood policy just for the structural damage, those things, and then have some sump pump backup coverage under their homeowners to provide coverage for those personal belongings or contents in the basement.
That's really helpful. And then you were mentioning about cars being totaled in this last
Sure.
storm.
So obviously, comprehensive coverage is a coverage you must have on your policy, your auto policy on that particular car in order to have coverage for flooding to your car. It's obviously an act of nature, so it would be covered under comprehensive coverage, depending on minus your deductible, whatever it may be.
Oh, that's great. And we have it. About the only time I've needed to put a claim of those darn rocks through the windshield when you're on 78. But
Or the deer. The deer seems to be a bigger problem around here than most anything else.
yes, and deer are comprehensive also.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so everyone, I hope you're hearing this. Todd is a wonderful local resource, and he's been sending things out before, during, and after the storm, which prompted me to call. Thank God we had no damage, but I would be shocked to call and find out that I needed flood insurance. And I just think this is something, although the storm has happened, it's not the last. Everyone needs to go out and get things going and make sure they're covered.
Sure.
Todd, anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I mean, I always think it's best to deal with a local agency or broker who's familiar with your area and familiar with coverages. Dealing with someone from a call center may not be really familiar, and also may not have the heavily invested in making sure you get settlement. And also good to have a broker who deals somewhere between helping you and also helping you with the claim with the insurance company is always good. Our offices are located in Bridgewater. We handle the whole area, so we can help anybody out with anything they need for any type of insurance.
And this is living proof because we got things from you. I asked you about it and you responded right away. And, you're right in the neighborhood. And even for this, you made yourself so readily available to get the word out.
Yeah, my email is always working for people. I answer questions all the time tonight if they need it. So whatever they need, we're here for them.
Thank you so much, Todd. I'm really grateful. And everyone, please go out and get that insurance. Check your policy for the Sump coverage that you have it. And then also, please be sure, even if you're not in a flood zone, that with the way things are and with the prices being so favorable, if you're not in a zone, to get that coverage.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marie.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, everybody be safe. Thank you.
Yes, well, our hearts are with everyone. Please be safe. Thank you.
Bye-bye.